It's actually funny because like woke is like a funny compliment to me, but it also can be like an insult. Maybe like
Yeah.
it's like the word cute, for example. Like if a
Yeah.
if a
Yeah.
woman you have a crush on or a person, they say, "Oh, Logan's super cute." I'm like, "Oh, shoot, I'm cute." Like if a black progressive tells me I'm woke, I'm like, "No, don't say that. I'm not that woke." And I'm like kind of shy about it. Like when Julian's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you want to be on my woke podcast?" I'm like, "I'm not the right guy for it." Yeah, how's my hair? Like I'm ready.
Right.
But
Right.
then it's actually funny because I'll be on Facebook just arguing with the wall at whatever point, and someone's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, you freaking woke liberal," and I'm like, "I am not. This is just common sense." And it's like because it's like if the wrong person, the bully at school calls you cute, it's like you don't want to be called cute anymore because it's not a term of endearment anymore. So yeah, it is an interesting thing. I
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Elephant. I'm your host, Julian, and I'm joined, not as usual, by my co host, Logan.
Hey, how you doing, Julian? Thanks for having me on.
Yep. Logan is subbing in for Anthony, who has briefly taken direly ill. And so we're
Oh
wishing
no.
Anthony our best. Please, Anthony, hang in there. Uh, you know,
Yes.
don't
Feel better.
don't let Bowen pull the plug on you.
That would be then I'd be permanent host.
Then you would be permanent co-host. Yes.
Okay. So hey, Bowen, do what you gotta do.
So today we're talking about a topic that gets every American very excited, and that is wokeness. Uh, and of course, I invited Logan on here because he is one of the wokest people I know, and I think that uh, he would be, a great guest to have on to talk about the topic of wokeness. And as some of our viewers may have noticed, there's another qualification he has. He is also white, which
Whoa.
is not a term usually associated directly with wokeness. But given that
Yeah.
he is both white and woke, I thought who better to engage on such a difficult topic and round out our perspectives. Do you have anything to say in your defense,
Yeah.
Logan?
So not only can I mansplain this, I can white-splain it as well. So that is, I mean, hey, your choice, not mine. I did not know of the topic before the acceptance, but happy to be here. I mean, growing up in middle of nowhere, Missouri, like why would I not be woke? I mean, most of us are.
Oh,
Um,
really? That's
no,
a
no,
surprising to probably many of our listeners as well.
zero people, zero people.
So, Logan, I want to start off our conversation today with a little bit about, you know, what does woke mean? How did it sort of catch on,
Yeah,
and how did you become woke? So to start off, I was doing some research, and I've learned that the term woke has actually been used for much longer than I thought.
yeah.
In fact, in the 1930s, people were saying "stay woke"
Hmm.
as a way of keep it within the Black community, keeping each other abreast of what is happening with the government and the state, and how their rights are being affected by that uh, government entities. But I feel like it took on a different meaning
Hmm.
around, you know, 2016, 17, something around there.
Yeah.
So, Logan, I don't know. When did you start to first encounter the term woke, and uh, how did you gain wokeness?
Hey, I'm curious though. If you did do a little research, I'm going to put some history knowledge to your test to
Go
test
for
your
it. Go
history
for
knowledge.
it.
What were they fighting in the 1930s? What was happening in the Black America that was needing this like conversation or this like maybe then it was probably like a undertone dialogue. Do you know?
I don't know specifically. I imagine there was a lot of different things, but I actually can't say it for sure.
Okay, I was just, because I think sometimes, especially within Black history in American history, and we do it with kind of all histories, but definitely Black history, we kind of cluster it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it was slavery and then civil rights, and it's like, well, no, actually, there's like 100 years in between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
The abolition of slavery, obviously, and then civil rights, and the Jim Crow, and you just kind of wonder because I think those 1920s and 30s were interesting for Black communities because they were still trying to like find their footing in freedom, and just kind of curious. So I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper on that and kind of
Yeah, encourage
understand.
all of us
Yeah, it's
to get woke
probably some
on
really
that.
great stories. I think like celebrating Juneteenth or yeah, I guess it was last month now, a couple weeks ago. It's kind of cool that there's starting to be like more stories, and it's not just
Mm-hmm.
as we've made it like a thing the last 5 years, but now it's like, oh, actually, this is like, the stories of abolitionism is just really interesting, and why anyone would dislike that is it is hilarious, but also just like saddening to me, but. Talking a little bit about me, I guess. I guess I was probably trying to define woke or like what woke is, or maybe it's like it's like that who is Jesus to you question. It's like what's woke to you, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
a little tongue in cheek there. But I was trying to think a little bit, and I realized that like when I think of wokeness, I think of wokeness as a fact that is not a community accepted idea. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they'll call you woke because you accept something that is probably a fact, but the greater community, or maybe even a minority community at large has decided like, oh no, we're not buying into that because we don't agree with it. So therefore, if you buy into it, you're woke. Transgenderism is a great example of maybe what people would label you to be woke if you agree with. It's a fact that transgender people exist. It
Mm-hmm.
is not a fact that everyone supports them, or it is. Yeah, it's not. Not everyone supports them. It is a opinion. A lot of people don't. So therefore, if you fight for that smaller community, you're going to get labeled that kind of like woke idea.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I became woke at the same time everyone else did. I'd like to be a forefront of wokeness, but I think I grew up rural Missouri as a private Christian student at Seventh Day Adventist schools. I was raised by liberal Democrat parents, so that was like already an immediate balance of just interesting, ways of life as to where most people in my community were pretty conservative Republicans. Um, and I think in that space, you kind of start to open your eyes a little bit, maybe just to different perspectives. And I think as you do that, if you're really like interested in expanding your horizons, I don't care if that's with food or with culture or with your friends, you're going to start to give a little bit more attention to something that you haven't given attention to before. Um, a great example of that is my family and I are going to Hawaii next month, and I'm telling my dad he's got to get ready for sushi, and he is not ready for sushi at all. That is not of interest to him. But I would say like, hey, like I think this is like what life is. If there's millions of people that think something's good, then we
Mm.
should probably kind of like buy into that idea a little bit. And I think that kind of presents maybe what wokeness is. But I mean, honestly, the same person brought us all to wokeness. And that was the terrorist that we currently have in our White House, Donald J. Trump. Um, and I think we all kind of, once we started to hear some of his rhetoric, that, I think the first time I heard about Donald Trump running for president, I was like, oh, interesting. And then the second time I heard about him running for president, he was calling immigrants, rapists, and thieves. And I was like, oh, less interesting. This guy does not seem very nice or very cool. And, immediately you're like, oh, you don't like his language? And I'm like, no, not really. And they're like, oh, you're just like woke. And I think that was probably that 2016 election was probably the beginning of wokeness for me. But also, like, not only was the 2016 election, but I lived in Berkeley that semester during that election, and no better place to learn about wokeness than Berkeley, California, the berserkly woke capital of the world, probably, or that's what Fox News would say. And so, yeah, I would say that that's kind of when it started for me. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so to me that makes a lot of sense. I think in 2016 was around the time you had the Ferguson protests after the death of Trayvon Martin, and
yeah,
Black Lives Matter was really, I think, catapulted onto the national scene, talking about
oh yeah,
policing reform, and that was, I think, a really difficult moment for certain people, especially in the Black community, where they were saying like, "Listen, the police are killing us,"
yeah,
and like your average American was like, yeah, but I don't believe that's really happening. Like that's not true. And like
sad,
maybe Trayvon Martin had it coming in some, roundabout
yeah,
way. And so I remember hearing that the term bandied around a lot more then, because it was kind of this symbol of like, okay, so there's a group of people who are like awake and they like
yeah,
actually see what's going on in the country, and
yeah,
then there's a bunch of people that are asleep and they have like no idea how like life actually works in the Black community and affects
right,
people. And then you fast forward to like 2020, 4 years later, I guess it's 2021, and you have George Floyd is killed, and then it's like filmed and people are finally like, yeah, we told
oh
you.
yeah, we will.
Like,
Yeah, we'll post a black square now, and we'll.
yeah, and exactly, post the Black Square, and so people were sort of waking up in
Yeah,
2020, and they're like, oh my gosh, like holy
yeah,
crap, Black people are being killed by the police, and it was like, okay,
yeah,
now finally everybody is like getting
yeah,
woke.
yeah,
um but I think it was very much this online, like I would hear it a lot online, and see it on like forums, to like in these discussions around race
yeah,
relations. And I think you're very right to the point that like Donald Trump comes on the scene, and there's just this huge division between the people that are like, this guy's obviously racist,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then other
Terrible.
people that are like, I don't know, let's like hear him out.
Or like, yeah, you can't just call me racist.
Yeah.
What do you do that's racist? It's like, well, all of these things that we're listing, and they're like, well, those just seem like coincidences.
Right. And I think that it's always been sort of difficult for me, because to identify yourself as woke, or to
Yeah,
call
yeah,
someone woke, is kind of very like righteously indignant, right?
yeah,
You kind of put yourself on a pedestal when you're like, I am woke, right?
yeah,
Like if you identify yourself as woke, it's almost like calling yourself enlightened, right? It's like,
yeah,
they basically have the same meaning, right? Woke,
yeah,
awake, enlightenment. It's like, yeah, this person is woke, this person is
yeah, yeah,
enlightened, and the rest of you are kind of just dumb.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've felt the same way, in some of these conversations around wokeness.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, um, I kind of think it's actually funny because like woke is like a funny compliment to me, but it also can be like an insult. Maybe like
Yeah,
it's like the word cute, for example. Like if a
yeah,
if a
yeah.
woman you have a crush on, or a person, they say, oh, Logan's super cute. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm cute. Like if a black like if a black progressive tells me I'm woke, I'm like, no, don't say that. I'm not that woke. And I'm like kind of shy about, like, when Julian's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you want to be on my woke podcast?" I'm like, "I'm not the right guy for it." I'm like, yeah, how's my hair? Like, I'm ready.
Right,
But
right.
then, like, it's actually funny because I'll be on Facebook just arguing with the wall at whatever point, and someone's
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, you freaking woke liberal," and I'm like, "I am not. This is just common sense." And it's like because it's like, if the wrong person, the bully at school calls you cute, it's like you don't want to be called cute anymore because it's not a term of endearment anymore. So yeah, it is an interesting thing. That we kind of saw. I think the stoles by the Democrats kneeling for 9 minutes in the
Mm,
House. I think that was the
mm.
beginning of the end of it. It was like once they did that, it was like, all right, this now has become politics.
Yeah.
It's not a movement anymore. It's just political.
Right, right,
And they're going
right,
to use it to their advantage to maybe get themselves or Joe Biden or whoever else it is elected.
right.
And it's like, okay, and then it's like, oh, woke is now it's become a political
Political
slur of some
football.
nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a poignant image. Like folks at home that are not aware of what we're talking about, please look up the Democrats kneeling for the George Floyd protest. I think that you're totally right. That is kind of one of those flashpoints. It's like, yeah, this is kind of the beginning of the end.
It's actually I'm in a group chat with uh I'm the only white person in the group chat
Uh
for
huh.
one, but it's just like a lot of like probably 5 or 6 of them work in like of my friends. They work in like diversity inclusion or just like
Mm-hmm.
anti-racist
Mm-hmm.
spaces or like they're very
Yeah.
vocal on these conversations. And we use that picture of Nancy Pelosi kneeling as like I cannot believe this was a time in American history, like joke
Wow.
almost. It's not like a joke because I will say that I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's so interesting with things like this where like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think there was probably some good intention there,
Yeah.
but also
Yeah.
like what can we do that can be filmed in a conversation about a death that was filmed, a murder that was filmed is like a
Right.
crazy. It's a crazy need for a better panel of people around them to say like,
Right.
hey,
Right.
like I know
Right.
you want to come off a certain way, but this is not to sidetrack that conversation, but I do kind of look back and think like 2020 was the like come together of wokeness, but it was also like
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of the end of it. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people got so involved that some people got burnt out and they were then the ending was like, oh, Biden won, we can take a breath. And now it's like 4 years later we're like, wait, why did we stop like caring about society as like as a whole in a lot of ways?
Yeah.
Like, why
Yeah.
have we kind of given up? And now we're watching what Trump's doing. And honestly, we probably should have been more vigilant towards Biden as well. Like, if we're talking politics, because if we kept our foot on his neck, or however you'd like to argue, say that, like, we might have seen more progress. We might have seen more, push for a different Democratic nominee. But
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, I think that the Republicans kind of really figured out how to use their stepdad energy to its like fullest effect when it came to
yeah,
like wokeness, right? Like they
yeah.
started using like I just have so many images of like Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity or like whatever Fox News host you want to pick, just
I would rather
being like
not pick any of them.
these woke liberals, and then like you can tell that the way they're using the word is like the way your dad uses like riz, like, hey son, do these shorts give me riz? And you're like, please god no, like
Please
I'll
never
never
speak
use that
again.
word
Yeah,
again. Like
yeah,
that's just so and they just went full bore into it. They're like, we're gonna say it and it's
yeah,
not gonna make any sense when we do, and it's gonna like disgust the kids so much that they're
yeah.
not gonna want to even like associate with the word anymore.
And they're gonna
Um,
be like, also like, there's the point of that where the Republicans. I mean, let's be honest. The Republicans are ran in large part by nationalists. I'll say they're white nationalists very happily, but just
okay,
they
well, you
are
can say that. I
American
can't say
first.
that. No, just
They
kidding.
are American first white
Yeah,
nationalists.
yeah.
And they saw like, okay, 2020 is a movement that is against our movement,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to do what we need to do to prevent that from happening. And honestly, because they could care less about the image of the other side, they're like, well, we can make fun of it, and all the people that watch us religiously, they will make fun of it with us, and we can, we've seen it happen with so many public figures. We watched them mock Obama to the point that people like thought he was a joke in some ways because of like tan suits. And I still have people that I thought were like respectable church members at one point that were like, are you sure Michelle's not a man? And I'm like, yeah, I think birthing 2 children is like a great example of a woman being a cis woman if they whatever. But it's like they're so good at let's make fun of this until it goes away like it is. And honestly, if you're 15 and your dad says Riz enough times, you're probably never gonna say Riz again. Like it's just
Yeah.
you're gonna stop. Even though I don't probably say Riz anyway. So props
Well,
to you for
that's
knowing Riz, Julian. That's pretty
well,
good.
that's because we're old, Logan. That's
Whoa, 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 whoa! I'm
sorry. I'll speak
old.
for
You're
myself.
still young.
um, yeah, I think one of the difficulties for me with this, waxing and waning of the popularity of the word is that, you know, on a certain level, even from an academic level, I feel that wokeness is very real because I feel that
Hmm.
wokeness is really just about history.
Yeah.
Like I think I'll remember the first time I sort of became woke
Mm.
was well, there's sort of two flashpoints to this story. So the first time I'm in elementary school and my teacher's giving me sort of it's Black History Month, every
Hmm.
black kid's favorite month in elementary school.
Okay. Yeah.
And the teacher's giving the lesson, and I put up my hand. We're talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm like, how long after he died did it take for them to like beat racism? Because I'm like 8. It's like very simple. I'm like, oh my gosh, like all
Are you
this.
in Palo Alto at this time?
No,
Where did you live?
I lived in San Jose, south
Oh,
side,
okay. Same
south
thing.
of San Jose. Yeah, I know, basically. So I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, this racism thing is like really bad. But like, here I am in a classroom with like people that don't look like me.
Yeah.
So Martin Luther King's dreams, basically my
Yeah.
life. Uh, so like, how long did it take after that for after he died for him to like for us to be like, oh my gosh, they killed him. Well, I guess we got to like beat racism now. This is
Yeah.
like how it worked in my head. And, my teacher says, well, actually, they passed most of this, they actually changed most of the laws while he was still alive. So, he got to like see the change. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really good. And I like went home like feeling really good like that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then, you know, I got to college and um
To Berkeley.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you start to like take these other history classes. They're like, no, but like we never really beat racism actually though. Like that you might have heard that in elementary school, but there's like a lot that's we
Yeah.
made things better, but there's a lot that like still exists to this day. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh crap, like now I'm seeing all this data and it's like
Oh yeah.
black wealth is average black wealth is like a tenth of that of white wealth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And black people are arrested by the and I always
Yeah.
knew that like black people were disadvantaged, right? But
Yeah.
I thought maybe we're making 80 cents on the dollar.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was
Yeah.
like a lot closer. And I think that especially because I grew up in Southside San Jose
Yeah.
and there were no other black people for me to like judge against.
Oh right.
Um
We're doing
yeah.
good.
That was it was hard to see that macro data like
Yeah.
in my own life, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I start seeing all this data and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, like the actual data shows that black people are like
Yeah. Yeah.
much less worse off.
Yeah.
And this is years after the death of Martin Luther King, right?
Right.
And I don't think that most Americans get that second story.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think most Americans get the story I was told in
Yeah. Yeah.
elementary
Yeah.
school that, like, you know, MLK had a dream, then he died, and then we beat racism.
Yeah.
And that's not how the story
Yeah.
ends because the story isn't over.
Right. No, that's yeah, that's really good. Kind of fascinating to see that because I think that's really true.
Mhm.
Especially speaking to white America. Pretty much everyone that I know would hold the idea that's like, I remember, well, I remember many things. But I remember one time when I was back in Missouri and I was talking to someone and they were asking about a racial protest of some nature, and they were like, "Well, isn't most of the oppression that they're talking about, isn't it internal?" And they just think that that exists. And I was just like, I don't know how to answer this very well because that is what I would consider a really stupid statement. But like, I think is like funny about that is also just the concept that yeah, like they, whether or not I think that a lot of those opinions are really dumb, they're really like opinions. They're things that people hold, and like I'm talking about like well-intended, maybe
Hmm.
Christian people that are just like, well, why are black people still like calling themselves a victim? And I'm like, well, I think you probably need to stretch outside of your bubble a little bit, but at the same point, that is exactly what you were taught. It's exactly what the TV that you watch tells you, and that's kind of where you are. The problem that I found so frustrating about all of that is that for the last like honestly, it was even before. It was well before even Trayvon Martin.
Hmm.
It's always been happening, but really since social media started to kind of like move to the forefront, we've been hearing black stories come forth and say like, "Oh no, we're still very mistreated." I remember the Baltimore
Hmm.
protests. That was probably like 2012, 2013. And I remember talking about it in a youth group, and all I had to do was like take 5 minutes to read the report about the Baltimore Police Department and how like incredibly racist they were. And it's like, oh yeah, this is clearly targeting black people. And but I think it's been the saddest is that since all of these conversations, those people have just decided to double down in like their bad take of like this is just black people saying that, or this is just LGBT people saying
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And it's like no, 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 like not only that, but like we're seeing you know two steps forward, one step back. Or with Trump it's like maybe we had one step forward and we're taking like four steps back in some areas that are like to the point that people will be like, well, how's Trump anti-LGBT? And I'm like, well, one of the letters stands for transgender, and he has decided to remove them from the military, from passports, and from state IDs, so you can no longer check a box. I'm like, that is an erasure of your existence. And they're like, well, how does that mean he hates them? And I'm like, why else would he? Like, what are we talking about? And then it's like, DEI, and they're like, well, yeah, he got rid of that because it was racist. And I'm like, no, it was actually there to help prevent racism from taking place. And they're like, yeah, but they were hiring unqualified black people. And I'm like, they weren't. That wasn't happening. And if it was, it was getting reported and not like no one's that's not a
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, like there were probably some admissions to colleges, but like all in all, it's still like overwhelmingly favoring conservative white men. But I think that's what's been so disappointing is we're like information after information. It's basically like, well, I'm not reading that. Like, that's not. I'm
Right.
not gonna pay attention to like the truth of this, like peer reviewed information or facts or articles. Which is why I kind of said like wokeness is the belief of fact that society does not agree with,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it's. But it is the most infuriating thing. Like 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, there was a conversation about undocumented immigrants, and somebody said like they posted this thing about the biblical perspective of
Oh my
why
goodness.
Jesus wants these people to be deported. And I was like, all right. And like a buddy of mine sent it to me, and I went on his page, and they were like, wow, those are great points. And I'm like, what points were great? And they were like, someone was like, all of them, they're the truth. And I was like, well, what about the truth of like arresting people without, with that have passports, green cards, citizenship, or the outside of workplaces and homes and like kids at school and outside of court, like what about these types of things? And I kind of rattled off a few things, and they were like, can you prove it? And I was like, sure. And I posted like 10 articles, and I was like, here you go, read away, these are all articles that cite my side. And then they just didn't respond. And I was
Yeah.
like, what, I thought you wanted to learn. And they're like, no, I didn't want to learn. It was just like I kind of believe what I believe in, and that's probably the most challenging part about that. But
Yeah, absolutely. I think that wokeness runs into the wall of like willful ignorance
Hmm.
often, right? And that's why I think it's a hard term to for me to square, because it's not that I want people to be I think that for a lot of conservatives, they see like being a woke liberal as this kind of uh, you know kind of the stereotypical social justice warrior that's kind of really wants to be seen as being enlightened, really wants to like prove that they're like elite and
Hmm.
have the facts that you don't. But I'm kind of like, but this is basic history, right? This is like actual just things that we should know from school,
Yeah.
and like you don't know them, and
Yeah.
like some of us do. And it's not about, and it becomes like portrayed as this like elitist,
Yeah.
West Coast cultural thing. And I'm like, but this shouldn't be cultural. This
Yeah.
is this
Liberal
is just about
brainwashing.
understanding, like, you know, what is the wealth gap between various racial groups, right? Like do women make the same amount of money as men, right? And
Yeah.
I think that being unable to establish this general basis of reality, and then also the willful ignorance to like not acknowledge any of that, puts us in like these two very diametrically opposed worlds.
Mm, yeah.
And yeah, I find it troubling that you could be just dismissed for bringing facts to bear
Yeah.
to the conversation by just being like, you're just woke, or you're from a woke place.
Yeah.
um
And that's what I'm saying. Like, it used to be like you would write it off, but and you would just be like, "Oh, I might disagree with that, but I'm like open to listen to it." But with that's why I say like the Trump made so many people woke is because he
mhm,
was blatantly disregarding facts and history. And
mhm,
not only that, not in like the typical political sense of like, let me use a different fact, of like, no, 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 I don't even need a fact. I don't need to tell the truth. All I need to do is say they're lying, they're socialists, they're communists, they're like the worst people on the earth, and I'm right. And it's like, that's what's been so interesting because that has trickled down to just like everyday people where they're just like, you're wrong and you're a socialist. And I'm like, they're like, oh, you're just a woke, libtard. Um, and it's just like, uh, why?
yeah,
What happened to what happened to the school that we grew up in that you were like you take a test because I truly believe
yeah.
like politics right now or just like culture in America is very like math where there's like okay 2 + 2 = 4 and like half of the country's like yeah 4 and the other half is like I wrote down 5 and it's like okay well you're wrong and they're like no you're wrong 2 + 2 is now 5 and it's like
Mhm.
no, no, no. We just counted 2 and 2, and we got to 4, and they're like, "You're an idiot. You're indoctrinated." And I'm just like, "Wait, what? What is? Where do you? How do you?" And I just like, you almost want to give up because you're like, "This isn't." Because it's not in reality. Like being like anti woke, you're not like in a reality. You are in an alternate society that has
Right.
allowed you to exist, and
So
it.
there's this like it's transition from just being like, anti just like liberals to also like anti-academic in general, right? And so they're like at war with all of the acronyms and the
Oh yeah.
letters, right? They're at war with CRT, right? Critical race
Yep.
theory, which was really just critical race theory was really just academics who said that, like, look, history was mostly written by
Uh, I
like
don't know what that is though. Like
old
no
white guys.
conservatives know what CRT is.
No, they have no idea. But for our listeners, CRT is,
Yeah.
basically, the way of looking at history and saying, like, history is written by a certain demographic of people, mostly like male, mostly white.
Yeah.
um, a lot of how they saw history was through that lens where they are, inevitably the good guys. But when you
Hmm.
look at it, a lot of the things they did was not actually so good. And a lot of the parts they left out actually have systemic effects that are
Yep.
bad that last till today. And let's look at history and factor race and the racial picture into the picture, right? Like when we look back at the 1950s and think, oh my gosh, that was such a boom time for America and it was great and it was lovely. And that was back when America was great. Make America great again, like then.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't great for everybody. It was like really bad for like a lot of people. And critical race theory is trying to like actually just show you history, but it's like no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. Some liberal woke academics invented that. Let's just throw that history out. And then DEI, as you
Yeah.
said, is like, was made so that people couldn't be judged for like, how their hair naturally appears, or um if they have a disability or whatever. And they're like, no, this is also just some woke nonsense, and we got to throw it out. And so it's like actively now anti, I think,
Yeah.
intellectual and academic, and um
Anti-black. I mean,
yeah,
it's
and
very,
all the
I mean,
things.
those DEI and CRT are both like, they are politically accepted slurs. I mean,
Hmm.
when people say, oh, Kamala was a DEI hire, they're saying, like, no, Kamala is a slur. And I don't even want to, use the letter
Hmm.
affiliated, but like that's what those people are saying. That when someone says that, Jackson Brown is a DEI or a CRT hire or whatever, they're actually saying like, no, no, we don't think black people hold the intellectual space to be leaders in society, and
Right.
so if they're in those places, then
They
they're
must be disqualified
yeah. Like,
by
well, the
default.
the very famous Charlie Kirk saying of, if I get on a flight and there's a black pilot, I just pray that they're qualified, and it's like, not it's like hilarious because it's like, okay, so you have a black pilot, like you pray that they're qualified. But the irony is hilarious because in the reality of that conversation, it's the white people that are often not qualified, and
Yeah.
that's why DEI exists or wokeness exists, because they were like, hey, you're hiring a bunch of bad apples because you care more about what they look like than if they're good or not. And it's like, no, 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 the opposite's happening, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
I
I
promise
mean,
you.
I think it's like so like ironic. You look at like, I think Pete Hegseth is my favorite person to call a DEI hire, and I definitely mean it as a slur when I do, because
DUI hire. Isn't that what they call it?
DUI hire,
DUI hire.
absolutely, because he's so obviously unqualified for his job, but like they put
Yeah,
him in the position as Secretary of
yeah,
Defense because he just like looks like a TV general, like the generals you would see on the CW.
yeah.
And you're just
Or
like,
Fox News.
yeah, of course he's got to be qualified, but no one calls him out as being unqualified, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
which is
I totally
yeah.
agree with your sentiment that like these terms are slurs, and they pop up in like the weirdest places. When you have that helicopter crash at the beginning of the
Oh yeah.
year, and Trump is like, well, this is because of DEI. I was just aghast because it
Ah,
took me a second. I thought, oh, that's so silly. It's so ridiculous. And then it took me a second for it to set in like, no, no, no. He's blaming people of
yeah,
color and women for a
yeah,
helicopter crash.
yeah,
Just random chaotic
yeah,
things happening in the world are now
yeah,
suddenly like our fault. And that's very dangerous. Like, that's
yeah.
a very
Oh,
dangerous position, right?
well,
You
because
have.
honestly, when
Mhm.
you hear the president say it, it gives so much power to the people. Like that's what's been so, like people are like, oh yeah, Trump can be like honest and whatever. And it's really interesting because if you look back on like 2016 when we were starting to see the rise of white nationalism and the attacks that Antifa was having with them, Antifa had kind of shut them down where they were kind of scared, and they were like, yeah, when we go out they kind of beat us up and like we're not going to be this. But now you kind of see it, and like, no, those groups are on the rise heavily again, and they're like, yeah, well, the president kind of likes us. They kind of, what's the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, like that's you know it's kind of when Trump throws the words of DEI for helicopter crashes. Like then when you go to the water cooler at work, you're like, yeah, you saw Jackie the DEI hire, and it's like, oh, that's a joke, but it's like, well, no, that's true though, because she's
Mm-hmm.
not qualified or he's not qualified, and it's like, why do you feel that way? And it's like, well, that's what Trump's saying. Like anybody that's of color, they're kind of shouldn't even be here, really. Like, and
Right.
it's like
Exactly.
it's so dangerous because it just
Yeah.
puts so much power to those words. As to
Mm-hmm.
where before it was kind of like, no, no, even I don't care if you were Bush, and maybe Bush is like a pretty racist dude deep down, like had pretty racist policies. Like he wasn't out there saying like, if you hire black people, they're probably not qualified for these positions. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it just adds a whole nother layer of just like fear to communities to be like, oh, and then not only that, the reverse DEI of Hegseth, which is like, let's reinstate all of these like Confederate statues and names
Mm-hmm.
of bases and stuff, and it's like, oh wow, these were literally put in place to like instill fear into the eyes of black communities, and we're putting them back, and we're not
Yeah.
really like, we're just kind of letting it happen.
I
It's
think they just renamed. I want to say a Navy battleship. Don't quote me on that, but from Harvey Milk back to some
yeah.
some general.
He said he's renaming all of them back to any Confederate that held it. He's going to put them all
Right.
back
Right.
in.
And there is, yeah, it's quite interesting because there's almost this, you can read between the lines and see that they actually understand that they're wrong about the history, so
Yeah,
they're going back out of their way to erase the history,
yeah,
right? So like Florida is rewriting their textbooks to say that slavery gave black people transferable skills for post-slavery, and and even like black Republicans are actually like kind of aghast at this, where they're like,
yeah.
wait, we thought this Republican thing was just about economics, but
Oh
now
yeah.
you're so
We thought the
there's,
racism was a small part. Now it's a big
yeah.
part.
So I think like what woke people have been saying is like, no, like this country is built on racism, and like
Yeah,
if if they get a chance, they will like take it back. And most
yeah,
people were kind of like, isn't that ancient history? Didn't we
yeah,
like beat racism once MLK died? And now we're seeing, as you said, with Trump kind of reawakening, is like, oh no, like if they do get the reins, they'll actually turn it back. Like
yeah.
that's one of the main goals, along with like the rich get richer.
Right.
Um,
Well, I mean,
and
we
so,
saw literally Elon Musk do a Heil Hitler on the inauguration stage, and they were like, that was just like at best a Roman salute, which is the same thing.
right,
It's
yeah,
like the media. I heard a comedian. He was like, "Yeah, the media." And Elon Musk said the media was twisting it, and it was like, "Yeah, all it took for the media to twist a Heil Hitler is for Elon Musk to do a Heil Hitler," and like,
yeah,
and it's like, oh, and the fact that like no one cares is kind of just wild to me. But
yeah, yeah.
I
So
digress.
I think the question for us now is, where do we go from here, right? We
Europe, I think maybe, or like Canada.
Canada's, with global warming, Canadian real estate is going to be looking pretty spicy in another decade or so.
Yeah, true. Give it
Um,
time. It's still pretty cold.
but assuming that we want to live in this country for the next
Oh,
10
okay.
years, what, you know, wokeness had a huge surge. It had a great moment back in 2020. I felt like, we didn't beat racism in 2020 either, but
No.
I like to believe that progress was made.
Oh yeah.
I am, I feel like cops have to at least watch
Oh
themselves
yeah.
more now. They can't just openly
Yeah.
gun
We
people
see a
down
lot
without their
more.
body cameras catching it.
Yeah.
And even if people still suffer at the hands of the police, like there's more accountability. Like we've
Right.
seen police officers go to jail and so on, which I think is good. I think progress takes time, but I think it starts with like accountability and
Mm-hmm.
evidence. Um, but we still want to figure out how to have nice things like be able to look at history critically, like in critical race theory. We want to be able to hire people who are qualified of multiple races, like with diversity, equity, inclusion,
Hmm.
right? But they're very dead set on rolling these back. And I think there has been trepidation in the wake of Trump's reelection to re-engage on those fights, like really advocate for CRT, really advocate for
Yeah.
DEI, really advocate for wokeness in general. So, how do you feel about where we go from here, and what are
Hmm.
ways that people can tackle racial, um, gender, sexual orientation battles, ableist battles in a way that's like still constructive and not dismissed?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there's a lot of things. I will say, I totally agree. First and foremost, that we did see a lot of progress. We can sit here and like joke and kind of like lay havoc on how wokeism has been like received by Republicans, but I think without some of the woke movements of 2014 with like the St. Louis protests, all the way, or Ferguson, Missouri, all the way up through Trayvon Martin before that, all the way up through like 2020 and George Floyd. Like, I think we saw a lot of people. Progress takes time. So does changing minds. Like, we saw a lot of people kind of move into spaces. We saw a lot of good podcasts open up and come into play that said, like, hey, you know what? You're more progressive than you realize. You're a better person than you realize. You're smarter than you realize. And I think a lot of people were like, you know what, I am. I have a lot of friends from high school and stuff that were even either like, hey, I appreciate you, or like, I found it this way. And like, I feel like there's a lot to applaud there, because I think all in all, a lot of people did really buy in and say, oh wow, these are real problems that our country faces. I think another thing we learned from that, and from like, um, people in the communities that have been there longer, which is obviously minorities and LGBT people, that are saying like, "Hey, protect your spaces." I think one way to move forward is you kind of really have to do that especially over the next like 3.5 years with the Trump administration. But you kind of have to be willing to say, you know what, it's okay to take a break from my racist, aunt or uncle, or it's okay to take a break from my coworker and not talk about these things, and like, it's okay to set boundaries and move forward with that. But like, also, while you're taking a break, you have to be prepared for the next time that you're able to not take a break and stand up for the right thing. um I think sometimes it can be draining to talk about these conversations at home. um but I think, I think about work. I had recently had a conversation with someone maybe 2 weeks ago that was like, hey, they were basically saying like, I think, saying other people's pronouns is annoying and disrespectful to me. And I'm like, whoa, 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 I cannot leave this conversation without having a little bit of engagement about how I think that's insane. Um, had I not prepared myself, I probably wouldn't have been ready for that dialogue. Did I change her mind? I have no idea. Probably not. Did I give her a perspective that was allowing her to kind of understand maybe what wokeness looks like or whatever? But then I think on a grander scheme, like, I think what we saw in New York last week with Mamdani winning the Democratic primary, we saw kind of a fruition in a small jar of what these movements do for us. Like, they bring us politicians, they bring us cities that are willing to tackle public transportation and tackle generational wealth and rent prices. And so, like, if we're going to live in these societies for the next 10 years, we're going to need to be able to really dig in and, grassroots invest in communities that are willing to kind of say, hey, our people are important no matter their color, wealth status, or sexual orientation. Like, and
Yeah, I
yeah.
think I think you're right there. One thing that I found very encouraging is that in between the two Trump terms, we had Biden's term, and when Biden got elected, I think on the heels of this protest movement led by Black Lives Matter and young Black activists, we saw, I think, in my opinion, a lot of uh, like I would say liberal woke agenda items actually turned into law, right? So, Biden passed the CHIPS Act, he passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, and he passed um, the Inflation Reduction Act. Embedded within those trillions of dollars were multiple stipulations that if you're going to do this project, it has to observe diversity, equity, inclusion
Hmm.
standards, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go out of your way to like hire people equitably, right? A
Yeah.
lot of the funding went not just to like coastal liberal cities, but to poor, if you look it up, it went to more red states got money from Biden's
Because
um
they need it.
yeah, because they need it, because they're poor people there, and they're people of color there, right? So your
As to where,
Alabamas and your Arkansas and your
sure.
Missouris, right? Like those places disproportionately benefited from that legislation, and I think that those are some incredible wins, because
Yeah.
not only like Biden is like one of the oldest presidents ever. He is one of
Yeah.
the whitest presidents ever,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
he is not a young black activist, and yet
No.
embedded within so much of his policy agenda was the agenda of those protest movements,
Yeah.
right?
Which is
And
like, you could probably have the same conversation with Biden. When did you become woke? Because like there was a time that Biden was just like an old
yeah,
racist dude. Like I mean,
uh-huh.
and we people will be like, well, Biden used to do this, and I'm like, yeah, but Biden decided that he didn't want to keep doing that, and he changed kind of who he was. And I could probably disagree with Biden on a lot of topics, mainly Palestine, but at the same point, it's like, Biden grew a lot as a human being, which is kind of
Sure.
what DEI is all about. It's like, hey, let's train you for a second to make you a little bit better of a person.
Right, right. And he appointed, a black Supreme Court justice
Yeah.
in Ketanji Brown, and in fact, his appointments to the judicial bench are like the most diverse of any president
Yeah.
ever, including Obama. Um, more, I know, right? Oh my gosh! So there's all the like.
The black guy didn't just appoint black people.
I'm as surprised as you are. That's why I voted for him for 2 terms. But he must have been the one, puppeteering things from behind. He must have been, when they said the deep state, it must have just been
It must have
Obama.
just
Yeah.
been Obama and Michelle,
Yeah.
like Michelle and Obama.
Yeah, like they weren't out kite
You know,
surfing.
yeah, no, they were back there, like
But yeah,
Joe.
I think that when the movement transcends the people that are leading it, then you've really kind of won, right? Because you've
Yeah,
influenced people
yeah,
so much that it is now the default setting for the party to have these equity stipulations and these inclusionary measures. And I think that's huge. That's transformative, right? And unfortunately, we didn't get to see what like a second term would look like. But I mean, we were, you know, not exactly this close, but the last election was between a female, black, and Indian Democratic nominee,
that had
and
6 weeks to put a
yeah,
campaign together.
and she came within striking distance of winning a national election. Like that is
Yeah, literally
just
probably has a better conspiracy theory against a stolen election than Trump ever did. Like,
mhm.
as I mean, looking at how states voted and stuff, I kind of still think that he stole the election. I think Elon's been alluding to that enough, but that's another podcast topic, I guess.
But yeah, for me, I think that like it's not just all about color, but just on the surface,
Yeah, the fact
we
that we
have
had a black Indian female nominee that got
yeah,
75 million votes is like a it is a thank you to the people that came before that. Um,
exactly.
that we wouldn't have had if it wasn't for X, Y, Z, any of those. Julian, and even in second grade, talking to his teacher, thinking racism was over. We don't get these things without all those dominoes falling. And even though she lost, we won in a lot of ways because without her we probably don't have Mamdani and a Pakistani, I believe, American that's like running for mayor. You don't get some of this stuff. You don't get the AOCs on the nominees for possible presidential candidates in 2028. What you don't get any of that
Yeah.
without some of this.
And millions of people of color voted for Mamdani and Kamala, but millions of white people did too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And they didn't do it because they thought, oh boy, I'm going to show up and be so woke by voting for her. They were like, I think she's the best person that can
yeah,
do this job, right?
yeah,
And I mean, for a woman of color to achieve that level of parity is really just so historic for this thing.
yeah,
Just because she lost does not deny that. And I think that when we think about wokeness, and even if it's trivialized by the right, like we have just become the country has changed night and day since like I was a kid studying
yeah,
in elementary school, right? And I think that it's a credit to everybody that came before, and to me optimistic that like as we go further, this is not the time to be bearish on the at least the ideas of wokeness uh, and the values of it. It's the time to be bullish that like yeah we can push for these things and we can get them,
yeah.
and we may lose some elections along the way and there may be some bumps in the road, but eventually everybody will start to acknowledge the history, the reality, the facts of um, that America was not always set up to be for everybody,
Right.
but we're getting closer and closer to that end goal.
No, it's true. I think like one thing we overlook too is as I kind of like click through here, like uh, I think Kamala has the third most votes of any presidential candidate in history. I mean, that's something that you don't, Trump beat her this time and Biden beat her last time, but that's she's number three. Like that's, I know that we've grown in population, but that's like not to be slighted here. Like it's all great, even though we don't always love the outcomes and things like that. It has been a beautiful like kind of movement towards what is next, and hopefully part of that next is a Republican Party that either has no more of Donald Trump because he has gone to live with Lucifer, and uh, I shouldn't say that, but I did. But like, where do they go at that point? Does like JD Vance and his mascara, or Marco Rubio, like these guys, I don't see as like up and coming, clear cut, easy wins. But hopefully, one thing it does do is it moves us towards more women, towards more minorities, towards more voices that didn't have them before, that didn't get the opportunity because that's why these people are getting more and more votes, is because these communities are saying like, I appreciate now, like I feel like I'm a part of this now, like I feel like my community is getting spoken for now. And a lot for hundreds of years you couldn't say that in the United States.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Logan, thanks so much for your insight.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks for having me on.
And your candor and humor as always. And to our listeners at home, please subscribe. But you know what? If you don't,
Subscribe, Mom.
Yeah, it will be. We can still be friends.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.